Without much ado, let me hand you over to Vikas Singh, before which allow me to make a very short introduction for Vikas. Vikas is a founding member of the Rail Enthusiast Society. I would like to believe that Vikas is one of the few people whom I would say is a professional hobbyist. The number of hobbies that Vikas has and the depth and passion with which he follows each of those hobbies is truly remarkable. To just name three of his hobbies, Vikas covers the three T's beautifully. Tintons, tea, and trains are his hobby. We'll be seeing more of Vikas later in the day, so I'll walk you through each one of his hobbies slowly. But now, since we are at the 12:15 mark, I hand over to Vikas Singh for the first session of day two.
Hi, good morning, everybody. This session was supposed to be a direct interaction with Paul Thoreau. Now, unfortunately, he is not well. He stays in Hawaii and he's not well. But he was very kind enough to send us answers to the questions. So we sent him a questionnaire, and he sent us his answers, and we will be sharing that with you now as a part of that. Yeah, so you can hear now, Mike?
Absolutely clear.
So here is Paul Thoreau and his famous photograph on the back of Humayun's tomb and the railway line there in Nizamuddin area. Now, if there were an A list of great writers, Paul Thoreau's name would be at the top. He revitalized the travel writing genre in 1975 with his book, The Great Railway Bazaar. And since then, he has written more than a dozen travel books and 28 novels or short story collections. Now, so he's quite a prolific author, having written more than 42 books. He has written about regions as far-flung areas as Britain, Patagonia, the South Pacific, Mediterranean, Central Asia, and Africa. His novels, The Saint Jack, The Mosquito Coast, Dr. Slaughter, and Half Moon Street have been made into films. And his short story collection, London Embassy, was adapted for a British miniseries in 1987. He holds honorary doctorate from 3 American universities and remains a highly sought after speaker. The Times London calls him one of the most accomplished and worldly wise writers of his generation. He lives in Hawaii and on Cape Cod. Now, these are some of the most famous books he has written. 1975, The Great Railway Bazaar. 1979, The Old Patagonian Express. 1988, his book on the journey through China, Riding the Iron Rooster. 1995, The Pillars of Hercules, a book on the grand tour of the Mediterranean. 2002, The Dark Star Safari, overland from Cairo to Cape Town. 2008, Ghost Train to the Eastern Star. 2011, his anthology on travel books, The Tao of Travel. 2013, The Last Train to Zona Verde. Now, these are some of the books that we asked him about, and we are going to share with him his replies on the questions. The first question we asked him is, now his friendship, and later, they had a massive fallout again to become friends again with V.S. Naipaul. So in an interview, he once shared what his friend V.S. Naipaul told him. A book needs a reason to be written. What has been the reason behind your travel writing? Now, Paul says Naipaul was referring to fiction, the necessary notion behind each book, because fiction writing is so complex. Travel writing is another story, and I think its motivation is more easily explained. In my case, curiosity, restlessness, the need to get out of the house after a long spell at my desk. Also, the cultural temptations, a new language, another aesthetic, and so forth. I'm also fascinated by the changes, sometimes ravages of time. How do countries develop or fail? But it all boils down to curiosity. I think that's something we all rail enthusiasts have in common. We all are joined by this common thread of being curious all the time. Now, we asked him, in Riding the Iron Rooster, you have described your travels by railway in China. You travel through China for a year, ending your journey in Tibet after visiting Mongolia, Xinjiang, and Manchuria. In fact, Xinjiang is that area in China which is very famous for its pottery, and the tea made in Xinjiang pottery is supposed to taste heavenly. You write, it seemed to me that the Chinese who had no choice but to live the dullest lives and perform the most boring jobs imaginable, doing the same monotonous Chinese two-step from the cradle to the grave, were never happier than when on a railway journey. Can you elaborate? Now, for some people, this may cause a lot of discomfort, the way he described China, but it was possibly the way the society was at that point in China. And he was quite frank about it. He says, I was writing in 1986-87 before China had modernized. And while the Chinese people were strictly controlled, it seemed to me that the people I met in factories or in towns, or sometimes in their very small living quarters, were confined to a routine that repressed them. They craved, as most of us do, to be on the move, to see new things, to visit relatives or shrines. And so on the train, they were in a sense set free, excited to be on a journey. I think any traveler can relate to that, because a train, unlike a plane, allows us to look out of the window and appreciate the passing scene, landscape and people, and this is a vitalizing experience. So we asked him, many travel writers fabricate or embellish their writing with imaginary experiences and imaginary friends. Does this take away from the soul of the book? And he said, I suppose some writers embellish. And he gives an example. Bruce Chatwin claimed he fictionalized much of his writing, but has subscribed to the liberating Zen, saying, see things as they are. I have sometimes been criticized for being forthright, but it's the only way a good travel book can be written. The truth seems very odd or awkward when set down in black and white, but after a period of time, it illuminates. And I do believe that writing the truth can be prophetic. Now, this is something, most people would be very uncomfortable with in today's generation. And so we asked him, you have been quoted in an interview, travel works best when you are forced to come to terms with the place you are in. When I was in the Peace Corps, I never made a phone call. I was in Central Africa, I didn't make a phone call for 2 years. I was in Uganda for another 4 years, and I did make a phone call. So for 6 years, I did make a phone call, but I wrote letters, I wrote short stories, I wrote books. So is solitude necessary to write a good book? And he says, he quotes Samuel Beckett, who said, solitude is paradise and I conquer. But when I talked about coming to terms with the place, I wasn't only talking about solitude. I was referring to isolation, which is a different thing. Being isolated in Africa, I needed to continue doing my job, teaching in a school in Malawi and in a university in Uganda, and also writing. In fact, if I remember correctly, he met his first wife while working in Uganda, and also writing, beginning to write. So I deliberately cut myself off from home. I didn't hanker to go back to US. I learned the local language in Malawi, which is Chichewa, and in Uganda, which is Swahili. By the way, I learned much from Indians in Africa who had accommodated themselves to the distance from India. They were less caste conscious, more open-minded, and learned languages. They habituated themselves to being aliens, to coming to terms with living in societies that were often hostile or strange. So when Indians were expelled from Kenya and Uganda in the 70s, they easily understood how to live and flourish in Britain. So we asked him about the Ghost Train to Eastern Star, in which he recreates a journey undertaken by a train mostly through the Eastern Europe, Turkey, the Caucasus, Central Asia, the Indian subcontinent, China, Japan, and Siberia. So I asked him, what was the motivation behind this epic journey? And he says, in that book, I wanted to retrace my itinerary of the Great Railway Bazaar. But while in the Great Railway Bazaar, he had traveled through Iran and Afghanistan, which were then close, which were now close to him. He detoured through the Caucasus, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan, where I found some good railway journeys. As I have mentioned, I wished to see what had happened to these countries I had visited in 1973. And of course, had some pleasant surprises, most of all in Vietnam, which had healed itself from the war. But Afghanistan, which in 1973 had seemed fairly jolly, or though all adult males carried a rifle, had become a war zone. Indian railways were unfailingly full of interest. Now, he loves traveling alone. So we asked him, you love traveling alone and traveling light. Has this helped curate memorable experiences for you? And he has a very interesting thought on that. He says, traveling alone and traveling light have allowed me to make radical decisions and change of plan at a moment's notice. Kipling said, down to the Ghenana of up to the throne, he travels best who travels alone. Though Kipling didn't travel alone very much after he married his stern American wife. As for memorable experiences, someone says to me, an odd thing happened to me. It's rather a long story, I'm afraid. And I reply, tell me, I love long stories. And I change my plan so that I can listen. I mean, that's the sense you get when you read Paul Thoreau's book, because it's beyond just a travel book. A lot of human stories, human angles, which he talks about in his books, which make it so interesting. We asked him any memorable experience from his travels to India that he would want to share. And he shares an interesting episode. He says, many, you mentioned my ghost train book. I was taking the train from Jodhpur to Jaipur, and in a sleeping compartment, I struck up a conversation with a certain Mr. Kapoor Chand. We talked about many things, as I relate in that chapter, about Jain beliefs, diet, ethics, personal theories, the wish to become a mendicant, and prayer. I wrote in my notebook that night, this man, the perfect traveling companion. About 2 years ago, I received a letter from Mr. Kapoor Chand's daughter. She had read the book and recognized her father. And he then wrote to me. So a connection, a good friend, and an experience to carry into the future. We asked him, your rail travels in the formative years helped shape your views and writing. However, the romance of railway journeys is now fast disappearing. Fewer people want to travel by train. How do you see this change from the prism of a railway writer? And he makes a very interesting observation. He says, I think there will always be trains, but they will be different as technology alters them. The railway experience I have had are somewhat dated, I suppose, but they can be recaptured in other places. India will always need trains, and so will Japan and Europe. The trains of Thailand and Vietnam are wonderful. South America has more or less abandoned its railways. I think the romance, as you put it, is likely to diminish. But that is true of much of a travel as the world shrinks and travelers become more numerous. Now, he gives a very good example. He says, there was once a train on the island of Oahu from Honolulu to the town of Kahuku, about 60 miles, hauling passengers and sugarcane. A terrible storm in the late 1940s destroyed part of the track, and the lines were never rebuilt. A road replaced it. Last year, Hawaii had 10 million tourists. Farewell, romance. So we asked him, the old Patagonian Express is a fascinating account of your journey by train through the North and South Americas. It is perhaps the only travel book of its type. So how interesting and different was this travel experience in these different countries, which actually passed through 2 continents. And he says, this was an example of seize the day. I was able to travel by train from my hometown in Boston to Patagonia. The trains were ramshackle in some cases, but they ran. Very few of these trains run today, though the ones in US are still in service. The lesson for me was, don't procrastinate, take the trip. It might not be possible later. We asked him, you once said that a novel captures the soul of the people, while a travel piece inevitably lacks emotion. Why do you feel so? And he says, a novel is able to place you inside the mind and heart of a character. We know fictional characters much better than we know many of our friends and relatives. A traveler writes mainly of surfaces and appearances, and often is describing his or her own feelings. The autobiographical element in travel writing that can be illuminating or often annoying. And that's why sometimes you get very hard and different reactions from readers who read Paul Theroux. Some love him for his writing, while some have very harsh opinion about the way he has described certain cultures and certain countries. Now, as a writer, are you more attracted to the places you visit or the people who live there? And he puts it very interestingly. He says, as always, what V.S. Pritchard called the human architecture. For him, he says he does not want to go to a museum or to see a beautiful park, but it's the people who always have attracted him. Now, once while talking about your book, The Great Railway Bazaar, you said, I wanted to avoid sightseeing, museum, scrutiny, church going, and the veneration of graveyards and monuments. And dialogue, travel books seldom had much. What made you feel so? Did this experience define your subsequent writing style? And he says, I realized that the travel books I liked contained little scenes of real life with dialogues and drama and humor. The early books of Naipaul had this, but in fact, I learned it from Mark Twain's Following the Equator and Anthony Trollope's The West Indies and the Spanish Man. By the way, Mark Twain traveled 1200 miles by train through India, and I may say there is great humor in both these books. We asked him if there are 3 travel books other than those by you, which ones would you recommend and why? And he says, rather than list 3 travel books, I suggest an interested reader to consult my anthology, The Tao of Travel, in which I list and describe more than 300 travel books worth reading. Now, for all the real enthusiasts out there, if you really love reading travel books, reading about train journeys, about meeting people, then this anthology is a must read, because it really opens up your mind to more than 300 travel books. And if they are there on your reading list, you would be a much more aware traveler. Now, this is a book that he published in 2019. And this was, he was motivated to write this book when President Trump demonized the Mexican immigrants in a widely publicized speech. He called them rapists and murderers. Now, one of the objects of travel ought to be to destroy stereotypes. Now, he says, this was in my mind when I took a long road trip along the Mexican border and deeper into Mexico, driving my own car. Trains in Mexico are now purely for freight. So this is a book he bought in, he published in 2019. This is his latest book, which is to hit the shelves this year. This is what he has to say about his latest book. Under the Wave at Waima is a novel about the surfer in Hawaii who commits a thoughtless deed, and this changed his life. I have lived in Hawaii now for more than 30 years and reside on the northern shore of Oahu, an important surfing destination. So this is a picture that he had shared with us for the conference. Now his son wrote back saying that, in case there are any questions that people at this conference would want to ask them, you can put them in the chat box and we will send it to him, and he is going to reply to every single question. Yeah, so that was Paul Theroux for you. In case you want to ask him anything, please put the questions in the chat box, and we will share it with him, and he is going to reply to every single question. Mayank?
Okay. Anyway, Vikas is just finished. He wanted you to come on.
Okay, so I think since we have time, can we share the quiz and the answers?